I went winter camping on Lake Seven in Michigan's Upper Peninsula in January of 2022. If you've never heard of the place, that's normal. It's not a tourist lake. It's a quiet, frozen, middle-of-nowhere spot tucked between long patches of forest and old trapping trails. My friends, Eric and Matt, had been talking about doing a winter ice camping trip for years, and they finally talked me into it. The plan was simple. Hike in with sleds, set up a heated ice tent, spend 2 nights fishing, and shoot some photos for a winter project Eric was working on. He told me the lake freezes solid enough to hold trucks by mid-January. I still didn't love the idea of sleeping on ice, but the guys were confident, and they'd done similar trips before. I hadn't. We parked where the plow had stopped for the season and pulled our gear in on sleds. The air was sharp enough to sting your throat with every breath. There was a quietness you only get in deep winter woods. No wind, no birds, just the crunch of boots and sled runners behind us. It took about 40 minutes to reach the lake. When the trees opened up, the surface looked like a huge white field. No tracks on it except a few snowmobile lines on the far side. It actually looked peaceful, and for a moment I thought the trip would end up being pretty normal. We dragged the sleds out about 100 yards from shore and set up the tent. It had an insulated shell and a small propane heater that kept it surprisingly warm. We drilled a few holes, dropped lines in, and settled in with coffee. We noticed a woman around 4 p.m. Actually, Eric saw her first. He was outside adjusting one of the tent anchors. He stuck his head back in and said, "There's someone way out on the ice." I went out thinking maybe he met a snowmobiler. But no, about 200 yards away, dead center of the lake, stood a lone woman. She was facing our general direction, but didn't seem to be looking directly at us. She didn't move. She wasn't bundled the way you'd expect someone to be out there. It looked like she had a long coat on, but no hat, which didn't make sense in that cold. Matt came out and said she was probably ice fishing, but she didn't have gear. No sled, no bucket, no holes in the ice around her. She was just standing there like she'd been placed there. We watched her for a few minutes. She didn't turn or shift her weight. The wind wasn't moving her coat. She just stood there, fixed on one spot. After a while, I got uncomfortable and went back inside, trying to ignore it. I kept telling myself winter light plays tricks on your eyes. Ice glare can make shapes look different than they are, and people wander lakes sometimes. Nothing was wrong, but when Eric came in again around 5, he looked shaken. He said, "She's closer." I went out with him and looked. The woman was now maybe 100 yards away. Same posture, same direction, same stillness. The distance she'd gained couldn't have happened without us seeing her move, but none of us had seen anything. No footsteps on the ice, either. Not that we could see from that far, but still, Matt suggested she was disoriented. It happens. People get turned around on frozen lakes and wander. We decided we'd approach her after dinner if she was still out there. We weren't thrilled about the idea, but it felt wrong to ignore someone in the cold. By the time it was dark, we didn't see her anymore. I figured she had walked back to shore without us noticing. I was relieved. That night, the temperature dropped hard. The tent heater did a decent job, but every time I got up to fix my sleeping bag, I could feel the cold pushing through the floor under me. The ice popped and cracked like it was stretching. The guys told me that was normal. Ice shifts. Lakes make noise in the winter. Around midnight, Matt shook me awake. He whispered, "Do you hear that?" I sat up. At first I heard nothing but the creaks and snaps of the lake. Then something else drifted through the tent walls. It was faint, stretched out by distance. It sounded like movement, not footsteps exactly. More like ice settling with a long, dragging tone, but slower, steadier, and closer together. Eric looked out the tent flap with his headlamp. He froze, then shut the flap. His voice dropped to a whisper. "She's back." I crawled over and opened the flap myself. I figured maybe he'd misseen something. But no. About 30 yards away stood the same woman. Closer than before. Still facing us. Still not moving. Her coat looked heavier in the light. Not thick, just longer, like it touched the ice. Her hair hung down straight, almost frozen in place. She wasn't shivering. She wasn't reacting to the cold at all. I pulled my head back inside and zipped the flap. Even in the tense heat, my body felt chilled. It didn't make sense how she'd gotten so close without any sound. And even if she had walked over, no person should be standing still out there in that kind of cold. Matt said maybe she needed help. Eric said something felt off about her, and I agreed. We didn't sleep much. Around 2 a.m., the ice made a loud shift beneath us, and for a moment I thought the whole lake was cracking. Then it settled again. The heater flickered. The air felt heavier. We took turns peeking out of the tent. Every time, the woman was in the same place, same pose. After about an hour, we finally shut the flap for good and tried to ignore it. When daylight hit, I crawled out expecting her to be gone. She was. We walked out to the place she'd been standing. There were no footprints. None. Not even faint impressions. The snow around the area was completely untouched, like no one had stood there at all. The ice was smooth. I told the guys I wanted to head back to the truck. Maybe we were tired. Maybe we were spooking ourselves. But I didn't like how any of it felt. They agreed. We packed fast and got ready to pull the sleds back to shore. That's when Matt stopped walking. He pointed toward the center of the lake. "Do you see that line?" Running across the middle of the lake was a long, thin crack. It stretched from one shoreline to the other, straight as if drawn with a ruler. It wasn't wide, maybe half an inch, but it was too straight and too long to be a natural shift mark. And here's the part that bothered me most. The crack pointed directly toward where our tent had been, like a straight arrow. We started moving faster. Not running, but close. The wind had picked up and the temperature felt even colder than the day before. About 20 yards from shore, I looked back one more time. Out in the center of the lake, right at the start of the crack, stood the woman again. She wasn't there seconds earlier. I would have seen her. I didn't say anything. I didn't point. I just kept walking until we reached solid ground and tree cover. Once we were back in the woods, Eric asked if anyone else had looked back. Matt said he hadn't. I said I had, but I didn't describe what I saw. I didn't want to say it out loud. We got to the truck in silence. The whole drive out of there felt like we were pulling away from something that didn't want us leaving. I didn't go winter camping again that year. Honestly, I still haven't since. I don't know who that woman was. I don't know why she stood there or how she moved without leaving tracks. I don't know why the crack lined up with our campsite or why she only showed up on the ice and never once reacted to us. But every so often, in the dead of winter, I catch myself thinking about that frozen lake and that still figure standing out there alone. People say the Upper Peninsula has stories like that. Old tragedies, drownings, lost hikers who don't always stay gone. I don't claim to know what she was. All I know is she was there, and she watched us the whole time. I don't usually camp in the winter. I like cold weather. But I'm not one of those people who enjoys testing how long I can sit inside a tent when the temperature drops below zero. But in February of 2021, I decided to do something different. I'd been dealing with a lot at the time, work stress, too much time staring at screens. I picked a spot in Vermont near a place called Old County Road. It's not a real county road anymore, just a leftover name from when the route used to be maintained. The state stopped plowing it years ago, so once the heavy snow hits, the road disappears under a couple feet of white until spring. A lot of people snowshoe or ski in, but you can walk it too if you're stubborn. My plan was to hike about 1.5 miles down the closed road until I reached an old trailhead. There's a clearing there where people camp in the warmer months. I figured it would be empty in February, and I was right. The hiking was quiet in a good way. Trees packed tight on both sides. Snow hanging off the branches like heavy pillows. My boots sank deep with every step. I didn't hear a single animal the entire time, just the sound of my breathing and the steady rhythm of crunching snow. I set up my tent just before dusk and got a fire going. The air was sharp, but it felt clean. I cooked a simple dinner, drank some hot coffee, and just sat there for a while. It was the first time in a long time I'd felt any calm. Then, around 7 p.m., I heard an engine. At first, it was so faint I thought I imagined it. But then it got louder. A steady rumble. Slow. Heavy. Like a diesel engine pushing against thick snow. I stood up and listened. The sound wasn't coming from the woods. It was coming from the main road. I walked through the tree line until I could see the closed road through the branches. And that's when I saw the lights. 2 bright headlights creeping along the snowy route. The beam was low to the ground. The engine noise matched what I saw. A big vehicle moving slow. The lights flickered as it hit bumps under the snow. I realized it was a snowplow. But that didn't make sense. The road hadn't been serviced in years. There were signs posted at the trailhead warning people that the road was unmaintained after November. The plow route ended well before this spot. There was no reason for a plow to be this far in, especially not at night. But the truck kept moving. Slow, almost cautious. I didn't see a driver. The cab windows were dark from where I stood. It rolled past me at maybe 10 miles an hour, pushing snow aside in shallow waves, even though the snow was too deep for an actual plow run. When it disappeared around the bend, I waited for the sound to fade, but it stayed steady for a long time. Even after I could no longer see the headlights, the engine droned on. Eventually the noise died off and the forest went quiet again. I tried to shake it off. Maybe someone local had taken it upon themselves to clear part of the road. Vermont has a lot of older guys in small towns who do things like that without telling anyone. That was the only explanation that felt somewhat normal. Still, I didn't sleep great that night. The next morning, I walked out to the road to check. Not because I wanted to confirm anything spooky. I just wanted to see tire tracks to reassure myself it was a real truck and not my imagination. The road had tracks, but they weren't fresh. They were old, frozen deep into the snow, with a thin crust of ice over the top. Nothing had passed through recently, not even a snowmobile. There were no new plow marks, no churned up snow, no sign a vehicle had gone by the night before. I went back to camp feeling uneasy. I stayed busy, gathering wood, making breakfast, resetting some tent stakes, but I kept glancing toward the road like I expected to see headlights again. Around late afternoon, right before sunset, the woods went unbelievably still. Even the tiny breezes that had been moving the treetops seemed to stop. The kind of silence that makes you feel like something is waiting. And that's when I heard it again. Farther away this time, but definitely the same engine. A slow, groaning diesel sound climbing the hill from the opposite direction it had come from the night before. I walked toward the road again. The light was fading fast, and the sky was a flat gray that made everything blend together. But then I saw the glow of headlights in the distance, pushing through the curtain of falling snow. The plow crawled along, the same steady pace, the same low beam pointing forward. This time, though, I could see the front more clearly. The plow blade was bent on the left side, twisted like it had hit something years ago and never been repaired. Rust streaked down the front. The paint was peeled down to bare metal in places. It didn't look like a truck anyone would still be using. When it passed me, I stepped back behind a tree. I couldn't see the driver. The cab windows were frosted over from the inside, which shouldn't be possible with the engine running. The plow continued down the road and disappeared around the same bend. The sound lingered again for a long time, then fizzled into nothing. I didn't try to pretend it was normal anymore. I went back to my tent, packed up my sleeping gear, and started planning to leave first thing in the morning. I didn't like the idea of walking out in the dark, but staying another night didn't feel smart. Just as I got everything zippered up inside the tent, I heard something outside. It wasn't the plow this time. It was the sound of something heavy sliding across packed snow. Slow, rhythmic, a long scrape, then a pause. A long scrape, then a pause. It came from the road. I turned off my lantern and sat still. The scraping got closer. Not fast, but steady, like something was being dragged. When it reached the tree line, the sound stopped completely. For maybe 30 seconds, there was nothing. Absolute silence. Then the engine started. Not in the distance. Not on the road. Right outside the tree line. The same groaning diesel sound. So close I felt it in my chest. My tent fabric trembled from the vibration. Headlights swept across the trees, lighting them up like a white sheet. The light didn't hit my tent directly, but it came close. I held my breath. My hands were shaking. The engine stayed in that spot for almost a full minute. Idle. Low. Rumbling. Then it shut off. No footsteps. No voices. No door opening. Just the sound of the engine dying, and then nothing. I didn't move. I stayed sitting fully dressed inside my sleeping bag until the sky turned light gray and the woods started waking up. When it was finally bright enough, I stepped outside. There were no fresh tracks. But the thing that bothered me most wasn't the lack of tire marks. It was the drag line. A long, curved gouge in the snow like something heavy had been pulled across the road during the night. It led from the center of the road to the tree line, and then just ended. I didn't stop to figure out what that meant. I loaded my pack, strapped down my gear, and walked out faster than I probably should have with all the weight I was carrying. When I reached the main road, where the plowing actually stopped for the season, I met an older guy who lived nearby. He was unlocking his mailbox when I came out of the woods. He looked surprised to see anyone walking from that direction. I told him I'd been camping overnight and mentioned I'd heard a plow on the closed road. He shook his head immediately. "No one plows that road anymore," he said. "Hasn't been touched in years." I told him I saw one. Headlights, engine, everything. He paused and looked down the snowed-over road with a strange expression, then said something that stuck with me. "Well, if you heard a plow on that road at night, you heard something. But it sure as hell wasn't from this winter." I asked him what he meant, but he just waved it off and went back inside. I didn't push it. I didn't want to. I haven't gone back there since, and I don't plan to. I went winter camping in Idaho's Salmon Challis area in December of 2019. It wasn't smart timing on my part, but I had a few days off. The forecast looked manageable, and I wanted to clear my head before the holidays. I picked a spot along a ridge trail that stays accessible most of the year, as long as the snow isn't too deep. I'd been there in summer and fall, but never in the winter. The trailhead was completely empty when I parked. The air was dry and the cold hit fast. The woods were quiet in a way that puts pressure on your ears, like the sound gets sucked out of everything. I strapped on my pack and hiked in slow. Snow came up to my shins in some spots, which made it harder than I expected, but I wasn't in a rush. I started the hike late in the day, which wasn't the smartest choice. By the time I got about 1.5 miles in, the light was already fading. I was cutting it too close, so I picked a clearing just off the ridge to set up camp. The snow was untouched. No animal tracks. No sign of anyone else around. I was almost done setting up the tent when I heard someone walking toward me through the trees. Clear footsteps. Slow. Crunching snow. Steady. I froze at first because I hadn't seen anyone on the hike in, and out there in winter, you don't really expect random foot traffic. Then a man stepped into view. He looked like a park ranger. Heavy winter coat, green pants, a radio on his chest, and an old-style ranger badge on the jacket. He was in his 60s maybe, with deep lines on his face and gray in his beard. He wasn't wearing a hat, which struck me as odd, but he didn't look cold. He stopped a few feet from me and said, "Afternoon." His voice had that rough, tired tone older rangers tend to have. I said hi back and explained I was camping for a night or two. He nodded and asked if I was familiar with winter travel out here. I told him I'd done some, but not much in deep snow. He said, "Stay off the North Ridge after dark. It's not stable this time of year." I told him I was planning to stay close to my site. He nodded again and said, "Good. That ridge claims people." The way he said it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a warning meant to scare me. It sounded like he was stating a basic fact, like he'd said it 100 times before. We talked for maybe 2 more minutes. Normal stuff. How long I planned to stay, where I'd parked, basic safety questions. Then he said, "If you need anything, I make rounds near the lower loops at sunrise." He pointed down the trail behind him. I thanked him, and he walked off the same way he came, his footsteps fading into the trees. I didn't think anything strange of it. Rangers check on campers all the time in some areas. I actually felt better knowing someone was around. After dinner, I climbed into my sleeping bag and tried to sleep. It was colder than I expected. The temperature dropped fast after sundown. I drifted in and out for a while, listening to the pops and shifts of the forest. Sometime around 1 a.m., I woke up to the sound of someone walking outside my tent. Not fast, just steady footsteps moving around the perimeter. Snow crunching quietly. A pause. Then another step. Another pause. At first I thought it was an animal, but the spacing of the steps was too long, too deliberate. A person walking slowly around my tent. I didn't move. I didn't unzip the door. I just lay there, holding still, listening. The footsteps circled the tent once. Then again. Then they stopped directly behind my head. Nothing happened for maybe 30 seconds. No movement. No breathing sounds. Just silence pressing in on the tent fabric. Then the footsteps started again, walking away into the trees. I stayed awake a long time after that. When morning finally came, I unzipped the tent and stepped out cautiously. The snow around the tent was disturbed with footprints. Clear human footprints. One set. They circled the tent twice, just like I heard. Then they led into the forest. I followed them for maybe 20 yards until they faded into untouched snow. They didn't lead directly down the trail the ranger had pointed toward. They just wandered into the trees and vanished. I packed up earlier than planned and decided to hike out that morning. I didn't want another night out there. On the way back, I ran into a younger guy snowshoeing in from the parking area. He looked like he had a lot more experience with winter backcountry than I did. He was wearing modern gear and had avalanche sensors strapped to his pack. He asked if I'd seen anyone else up there. I mentioned the ranger from the evening before. The guy stopped walking. "What ranger?" I described the older ranger, gray beard, heavy coat, old badge. The snowshoer shook his head. "No one's patrolled this ridge in years. Staffing's thin. They barely check it in summer." I pushed back a little. saying I'd talk to him face to face. The guy shrugged and said he'd been hiking this area for 6 winters and had never seen a ranger up there. He said the only one who used to patrol it was a man named Caldwell, but he retired a long time ago. I figured the snowshoer just didn't have the most up-to-date info. People in outdoor communities sometimes assume they know the whole story, even if they don't. I didn't make a big thing of it. When I got back to the parking area, 2 trucks were parked near mine. One belonged to a volunteer group doing debris checks. The other belonged to an actual Forest Service ranger. Uniform, badge, everything. She was writing something on a clipboard. I walked over and asked if she knew the ranger who'd been in the ridge area the night before. She looked confused right away. "What ranger?" she asked. I described the same man. Tall, older, gray beard, old-style badge. She listened, then said, "No one from our team matches that, and no one's assigned to that ridge this season. That area's been too unstable." I thought maybe a volunteer was watching the area unofficially. She said volunteers don't go alone in winter, and they don't carry old badges. I mentioned his name might be Caldwell, based on what the snowshoer said. Her face changed a little. "Caldwell retired 20 years ago," she said. "He passed away about 10 years back. Got caught in a storm while checking the ridge. They found his pack and radio, but not him." She said all this in a calm, matter-of-fact tone, like she was used to telling the story. Then she asked, "You sure you saw someone?" I said yes. I wasn't confused. I'd spoken to him. He'd warned me about the North Ridge. He seemed real in every normal sense. She looked at the woods for a second, then back at me. "People say that ridge holds on to things," she said quietly. "Stories, warnings, whatever." I didn't know what to say. I drove home that day feeling like I had imagined parts of the trip, but I hadn't. I remembered the man clearly. His voice, his coat, his advice, the footprints around my tent. I don't try to explain it anymore. I just accept that I met someone out there who shouldn't have been there. Someone who walked like a man, talked like a man, and even warned me like a ranger doing his job.